Be respected, not used. Stop being too nice to men. It started so quietly, so simply that she never noticed the trap until she was already caught in it. At first, she believed she was just being a kind person, the type of woman who made life easier for others. When he called late at night, she answered. When he needed help, she was there. When he had excuses for not showing up, she forgave him. She told herself that love meant patience, understanding, and giving without measure. And so she gave her time, her energy, her heart. But giving became her identity. She thought she was earning his affection through sacrifice, when in reality, she was teaching him how little effort he needed to give in return. Every yes, she whispered when her soul wanted to scream, no, was another brick in the wall of disrespect he built around her. Still, she convinced herself it was worth it. She remembered the way he had smiled at her once, the way he had called her special, and she clung to those scraps as if they were proof of something deeper. She didn't want to believe that he saw her only as a convenience. The truth, however, was impossible to ignore forever. One evening, after waiting 3 hours for him to show up for dinner, she sat staring at the empty chair across from her. The food was cold, the candles had burned down, and her phone lit up with a single message. Sorry, something came up. No explanation, no apology, just indifference. Her chest ached as she poured herself a glass of wine and stared at the reflection in the glass table. She looked tired, older than her years, drained of the joy she once carried. The thought echoed in her mind like a cruel whisper. Why am I always waiting for someone who never waits for me? That night, unable to sleep, she scrolled through her phone and stumbled upon a lecture. A man spoke calmly, firmly, with a voice that cut through the fog in her mind. Peterson. He was talking about agreeableness, about the trap of saying yes to everything. If you're always agreeable, if you bend too far, people will not see you as kind. They will see you as weak. And weakness does not inspire respect. Her breath caught in her throat. She replayed the words, letting them sink in. Weakness, not kindness. She thought of every moment she had erased her needs to prioritize his. Every time she had been afraid to speak up for fear of losing him. Every time she had chosen silence over honesty. Suddenly, the truth was clear. She hadn't lost his respect by accident. She had trained him not to respect her. The realization was painful, but also liberating. If she had trained him to treat her this way, maybe she could untrain him. Maybe she could start over, not by changing him, but by changing herself. The first time she tried, her voice trembled. He called at midnight, expecting her to listen as he vented about his problems. Normally, she would have stayed awake until dawn just to comfort him. But that night, she said softly, not tonight. I need to rest. There was silence on the line. Then a simple surprise, oh, okay. He hung up. Her heart raced, half expecting guilt or anger to consume her. But instead, she felt something new. Freedom. The next test came days later. He asked her to cancel her plans and drive him across town. She glanced at her calendar, at the commitments she had already made for herself. Her old self would have rushed to his side without hesitation. But now she replied, I can't. You'll have to find another way. Again, silence. Confusion. For the first time, he realized that she wasn't his safety net anymore. The days that followed were a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Each time she chose herself over blind obedience, she felt her spine grow straighter, her voice steadier. She wasn't being cruel. She was being fair to herself. And strangely, instead of driving him away, it pulled him closer. His tone softened. He asked instead of demanded. He thanked her. He seemed startled to realize that her presence wasn't guaranteed anymore, that her love wasn't a bottomless resource he could exploit. But the real transformation wasn't in him. It was in her. For the first time in years, she began to breathe freely. She started painting again, the hobby she had abandoned when her evenings were swallowed up by his needs. She called her friends, laughed without checking her phone every 5 minutes. She remembered what it was like to exist for herself, not just for someone else. When she walked down the street, strangers seemed to notice her more. Not because she had changed her appearance, but because she carried herself differently. Her shoulders were no longer slumped under invisible weight. Her eyes no longer searched for approval. Confidence radiated from her, subtle but undeniable. One night, he arrived at her door unexpectedly, holding flowers. She looked at them, then at him surprised. He shifted awkwardly, his eyes uncertain. "You've changed," he said. She smiled faintly. "No, I just remembered my worth." He stared at her, the realization dawning in his eyes. She wasn't his to use anymore. She was someone to respect, or to lose. Whether or not he rose to the challenge mattered less to her than she thought it would. She no longer feared losing him, because she had already found herself. And that was worth more than any man's half-hearted affection. Her friends began to notice too. "You're different," they told her. "Stronger, happier." At first, some resisted her boundaries, testing to see if she would still bend. But when she stood firm, they adjusted. In time, they respected her more for it. And slowly, she realized something profound. People will only treat you the way you allow them to. Love without respect is dependency. Respect without love is emptiness. But love with respect, that is the foundation of something unbreakable. Her story wasn't about becoming colder, or harder, or bitter. She still believed in kindness, still offered compassion. But she no longer gave it blindly, no longer sacrificed herself to be nice. Her love became something precious, something to be earned. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. Being endlessly nice doesn't make people love you. It makes them use you. Being respected, however, changes everything. From that moment on, her life took a new shape. She became magnetic, not because she tried to please everyone, but because she finally respected herself. She drew people who valued her, who matched her energy, who saw her not as convenience, but as a partner, a friend, a woman of worth. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. She was no longer afraid to stand alone, because she understood that loneliness with dignity was better than companionship without respect. She would never again shrink herself to fit into someone else's shallow expectations. Her heart was still open, her smile still warm, but now they belonged to someone who had earned them. And in that truth, she found her greatest freedom. Because the real lesson was never about men, or relationships, or romance. The real lesson was about her, that her worth was not defined by how much she gave, but by how firmly she stood. And so, she walked forward into her future, not as the woman who was always too nice, but as the woman who was finally respected.